So we are engaged in the warfare of ideation. These are these are powerful ideas that have honestly journeyed thousands of years to get to the point where they are today. And I'll explain that very briefly. It's pretty. It gets pretty involved. Um, but what I wanted to talk about is what is socialism, what is communism, what is Marxism. Okay. Um, they're all related, obviously, but they're not the same things. Okay. So, a question that I get asked a lot is what is the difference between socialism and communism? Okay. So, socialism is any time the state seizes the means of production of a commodity, of a resource, most commonly because it's very lucrative, it's oil, right? So, Venezuela, I forget what year they did um, when they became socialist, when Maduro came in, but the government seized the means of oil production. And the government then sets the prices of that commodity. Um, there's no recourse. There's no sort of negotiation. That doesn't happen. Okay, so that's socialism. So think of it like the economic component of communism. So now we know what socialism is. It's anytime the government says this isn't for the private sector to produce. We're going to do it. And we're not going to do it based on market demand because with the government, the state, there is no market. It's all just quotas. So, like Magnitogorsk during the Soviet Union was the crown jewel of the Soviet Union in producing steel, manufacturing steel. And they were just doing it non-stop for years to the point where there was so much steel. The Soviet Union had so much. They had so many tanks, they never even got used because they built so many tanks. And how it worked, that the production of steel in Magnitogorsk, it was all done by quota, and each month you had to exceed your quota. Well, to exceed the quota, you had to overwork your workers, and a lot of people just froze to death and died while working. So that's what happens when the government seizes the means of production. It individualism, civil liberties goes bye bye. All right. So that's socialism. Communism is when communists say that real communism has never been tried, they're actually correct. But they're correct for the wrong reason. So, communism is defined as a classless, stateless society with the abolition of private property because Marx had it in his head that it's the ownership of property, of land, is what leads to corruption and uh, the bourgeois values, the ability for people to subjugate other people, to exploit them. If you own land, you're an exploitative figure, and you're to be done away with. And you know what that means. So, communism is this pie in the sky utopian vision that socialists have that at some point, once socialism has just dominated everything, Marx says that at some point the state will just see no need for itself and it will dissolve itself and then it will give way to this stateless, classless society. Now, Marx never says how that's ever going to happen. Um, there has never been a government that just dissolved itself because it just saw no need for itself. That's a fairy tale. So that's communism. Once enough of socialism has been implemented to humanity, and now people now see themselves as only social beings, there are no individuals. Once we get to that point, once there's now a biological need for socialism, that's when it will give way to communism, according to these Hegelian dialectical utopian uh, honestly, they're kind of religious. They're operating largely off of, well, no, they're operating off of faith. Just like Christians have faith that Christ is going to come back, communists have faith that at some point, once enough totalitarianism has taken place, and now humanity has been completely reprogrammed to now we are purely social beings. We no longer, according to Marx, he believed that we will just no longer want to own private property. He thinks that he can just reprogram human nature, and yeah, and then that's what will give way to the communist utopia. Okay, so we know what socialism is. We know what communism is now. What is Marxism? So Marxism is the it is a whole philosophy. It's a completely different way of thinking about the world, about humanity, about the purpose of history, everything, and it's through Marx's his he was a dialectical materialist. So he believed that the reason why people commit crime, why they do what they do, is due to material privation. So, like, you'll hear people on the streets, communists, say, well, the only reason why people commit crimes is because they're lacking something. And they'll plug whatever material privation that they think that person is missing, and then that justifies their criminality. So, Marx is a philosophy and a bag of tools that socialists use in order to achieve getting us to eventual communism. So, those are the differences, the similarities, how they all relate to each other. There's obviously so much more I'm not saying, but this would be an hour-long video, and honestly, I'd probably have to do like some little bit of research to make sure that I'm not getting things wrong, because it is complicated, and it's intentionally complicated, so that it looks enlightened, so that it appears to be like, oh, humanity is supposed to be going in this direction, and the only reason why bad things are happening is because people own property. It's honestly, it's a secular religion. It is what's known as, it's called a theosophy. It's a philosophical practice that operates like a religion, because these communists, they operate off of faith just like Christians do. They don't want to admit it, okay, because they're materialists. They have nothing to do with spirituality, so they reject all of that wholesale, but they operate under faith. So it is important to know what these terms and these ideas mean, because if you're going to the people down on ice and you're calling them liberals, they're going to eat you alive. They're gonna destroy you, because they do know what liberalism is. Communists know what liberalism is. So when they call you a liberal, regardless if you're a conservative or a liberal, because liberal in context of United States, the political system is not it's so think of liberalism as a category of thinking where it's, the uh, the elevation of the individual above the collective, above the state. You believe in free enterprise, voluntary exchange of goods. All of that is liberalism. So if you're in America and you believe in those things, you are a liberal. And you might be going, oh, I'm a conservative, oh, I'm not a liberal. Stop thinking that way. Okay, think outside of U.S. politics. Think in terms of global philosophy, where these ideas originally came from. So we need to get sharp, because the people that we're fighting against, they know their stuff. They do. Okay, communists are wrong, but they're smart. And I can't stress that enough. And if we don't know their terms, you're going to get beat up, and you're going to be left wondering why. It's because you don't know the terms, you don't know the ideas, you don't know the philosophies, you don't know the genealogy of the ideas. These people do. So if you're going to combat them, if you're going to confront them, you have to know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you're going to lose.